Hello out there. I just wanted to follow up about a post I did over the weekend. It's a photo of a basement in a house that I went to recently to do an EVP session. I asked all of you out there to try and to use your powers to try to remote view and see some of the history of the house or who may have occupied it or maybe some of the energy that might reside in the house. Everyone has done so well in the comments with this. I posted it on several different platforms and people commented what they picked up from doing this experiment. And I need to read just a few of these before jumping into the details of the house. So one person wrote, their chest felt heavy, they felt a male presence, and they could see a lady with and they could also see cigars and whiskey. This is very interesting. Another person wrote, I see a strong male figure. Someone else said that this wasn't their specialty. However, they felt a bunch of people in the house, almost like there was a party going on. And this, wow, is all I can say about that. And another person wrote that they felt someone, the presence of the house as almost if this, as if the entire house was meant to be looked at, like catch a glimpse of this. Another person said they tasted scotch. They felt drawn to the picture like it was a place used to entertain by its hosts. They saw a well-dressed man and a woman in her fancy dresses and lots of jewelry. Again, cigars and whiskey. Another person writes that this woman is sad and depressed, that they were drinking too much and her mind was overthinking. Another person wrote very speakeasy feeling. From by that, I kind of wonder if they mean like 1920s feel. Another one writes that it was a meeting place, like undercover, hushed discussions, nervousness, and feeling defeated, maybe. And then there's a couple more I want to read. There's a male here. He appears to me wearing a tux. And he wants us to know that he is wealthy, and he's got one of those canes. He looks a little bit like Charlie Chaplin, or dressed like Chaplin with the dark hair, the mustache. He's not extraordinarily tall, but he's medium built. And then another person writes, they have a feeling that it's like a doctor's house or maybe a hospital setting where people would come and get cared for. This is particularly interesting, and I'll get to why in a minute. And then another person writes, I hear something like the sound of a tick tick. I feel that a woman was kept there and abused physically and sexually. And then someone says that there was a woman being held against her will, and then thinking about a hospital or maybe a mental asylum. All of these are so very good. So the ones about the hospital in particular struck me because I'll just have to get to it, you guys. You're going to be so blown away by what you picked up. So let's get into the brief history of this house, and you can see some of the hits that you picked up on using your abilities. So the location of this house is in Galveston and is called the Bishop's Palace. Let me show you an image of this house. There it is. It is a grand, extravagant show of wealth and money built by Walter Gresham in 1893. He called it Gresham's Castle. The whole reason why he built this house was to show off his money. He was born in 1841, and he went on to found the Gulf, Colorado, and Santa Fe railroads. He was really big about transportation, moving things. This would have been particularly true moving stuff across the United States when the railroads were being built. Earning his reputation as the railway magnate, he kind of controlled a lot of commerce. He got into, he had his hands in a whole lot of different things. In Galveston, particularly, he was responsible for so many things in that city and actually making that a city. And you'll see what I mean in a little bit. He was a Civil War veteran. He was also captured during the Civil War, so he was a prisoner of war. He became an attorney and a politician, so he was kind of a big deal. He was one of the highest paid attorneys in the state of Texas. So he goes on to marry, and let me show you another photo of this house. This is kind of what architects use. It's called rivet. This is what the house probably looked like back in the 18th century when he built it. It probably did have a lot of land around it. For as big as it is, he built it for wealth and to look at me factor. He wanted it to be a castle and estate. So it would have had gardens and everything around it. So very similar to this. That's Grisham himself right there. Grisham had a wife named Josephine, and they had 9 children. 3 of those kids passed away very young. It was Edward, it was William, and Josephine. I'm naming these names just in case any of you picked up on the names here. Frank, Beulah, and Philip. 3 of those kids died very young, again, which may account for some of the depression and extra drinking that you may have picked up on from this. And let me show you, that's another photo of him. That's when he was in the Civil War. And then that's Josephine. Before I go on, I want to state this. In 1900s, one of the most devastating hurricanes of American history hit Galveston. Grisham's palace, believe it or not, a lot of people said they felt, I forget what they said, but it was fear or something like that. So this was the only house in the neighborhood built of brick at the time. So all the neighbors, their houses was being washed out by this storm. 200 of the neighbors took refuge in this home during the storm. It's recorded that at least 7,000 people perished during this hurricane. Grisham went on to, he built a giant seawall. This is how he got involved in politics, by the way. He started building a wall. He never wanted to see this kind of destruction again. So he was really big on city development. He basically wanted to turn Galveston into a real city because it was kind of on its own. So he's responsible for building the seawall and some of the other things, such as the education system. He's really big into education. That's important in just a minute. So in the 19th century, however, some people said that they felt that there was a little bit of hush hush and maybe that speakeasy feeling. So around the 20s, give or take about it says here 1911, he was being indicted. But yeah, around the turn of the century, his wife was having really large parties. They were living that socialite lifestyle. And so Grisham, this is right before all of the politics happened with the Prohibition. And for those who know a lot of Galveston history, Al Capone is very big in Galveston as well. He owned a couple speakeasies and establishments that gambled because it was pretty much on its own. There wasn't a lot of government interference. They could do this. There wasn't a lot of police force. So, and again, think about it. They just came out of a really big storm that devastated the entire town. So anyways, in the 19th century, most politicians like Grisham couldn't escape that kind of controversy. And according to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram article from 1911, Grisham was actually taken into custody, and he refused to show up for a Senate investigating committee about politicians receiving funding from liquor companies to push an anti-prohibition agenda. So he was caught up in that entire prohibition period. His wife was throwing really large parties. They loved that socialite feel and lifestyle. And, just picture it. They were probably doing the whiskey thing. They probably had I don't know. It was just, think about it. Like many affluent women over time, she loved throwing these extravagant parties. That's what she lived for. And she would love playing the role of hostess. So it got to the point where everyone in town came to her parties and she was throwing pillows on the floors and things in case people got tired. They could take a nap and then get up and party all over again. And let me show you those photos. Let me show the family first. So this is some of the kids. Just remember, 3 of those kids died very young. They're probably not pictured here because, this is an older photo of the couple. So he's actually in the middle, and so is Josephine, and then the kids are all around him. I don't know who's who in these photos. Just remember they had 9 children, 3 of them died. So at least 6 of them are there. Again, this is another photo of the kids. This is much earlier than the last photo you just saw. Probably a couple of those kids might have died. This one is very interesting. You see in the middle there, the housemaid. Now remember, this is very early 19th century, turn of the century. We have, if you understand anything about the South, what was happening in civil politics, you had a lot of freed slaves from that time whose families had to move on, and they actually ended up working in white households. They didn't really have a choice in a lot of times, all the way up until the 60s. If you know anything about Southern politics, these people were forced pretty much to work as maids and things in these houses. And that's what you have here. You have this woman. If you look at her face, she looks extremely unhappy. I kind of often wonder, she's probably there, not on her own free will. Her own children are probably at home and she's being forced to raise these white children. That's how it was back then, unfortunately. So then here, it's kind of hard to see. This came from the National Archives. These are the pillows on the staircase that she would put for her guests. In case they got tired, they can lay down, take a nap, and then wake up at 2 a.m. to continue the party. Very interesting, isn't it? So they seem to have like this big grand lifestyle, right? So in the I think it was 1920, Gresham dies. And then, of course, there was no money left. I don't know how that happened. They were the most wealthy couple in all of Galveston, and Josephine ends up having to sell the house. And you don't hear anything else about the children. They just kind of disappear from history. So Galveston and Houston, the diocese of the Catholic Church purchases this in 1923. And he only paid 40 grand, but back then it was a lot of money. But you have to wonder, how does a Catholic priest have the money to buy this house? Think about it. There has to be something going on. On top of that, I have a lot of Catholic friends who, a couple of them are involved in the diocese of the Catholic Church. And one thing about it, they do love to gamble on Friday nights. I know a lot of priests that gamble in the basement of the church on Friday nights. It's like a men's thing. So a lot of people picking up on gambling and smoking cigars and drinking. That is very much a Catholic thing. So the Gresham Castle becomes the Bishop's Palace, renamed for the most Reverend Catholic Reverend Christopher Byrne. Oh, before I get into that, this is a photo. This is one of their party invitations that they had. They kind of converged. I think it was like a railroad thing that he was promoting throughout. It was a big deal. And he mixed it with Mardi Gras. So just to give you an idea of how big and elaborate those parties are, that's one of the invitations to it. This is the guy who buys the house. How does a Catholic priest have the money to buy a house like this? It's just mind-blowing. So anyway, also think about it like this. This becomes a place where not only him, but there's several other Catholic priests that move into this house. It's probably like, I don't know, I'm picturing a bachelor's pad for priests to have parties and stuff. The church they worked at was right across the street, and this is where they would gather. So the people who thought about doctors helping, that sort of thing, this might have become a place for counseling. I bet any money people would come there to get one-on-one counseling from their priests. It's the only logic thing I could think of about that. After the diocese moved out of the house, I don't know how that happened. There's no records about that, but in 1963, the bottom floor became the Newman Center, and this is where the University of Texas Medical School, this is where they started to operate, is out of their basement of this house. So that's where the doctors come from. So a lot of young physicians were staying in the house, meeting in the house, and it was all tied in with the Catholic Church, of course, but nonetheless, it's still a medical school. So there you go. That's the history. You guys think about all the stuff that you picked up on from this. We're going to do another experiment like this again in the near future because I find it so interesting and how you guys were able to pick up all of that stuff. So thanks for listening, and until next time.